You've kissed someone. Maybe recently. Maybe a long time ago. Maybe a romantic partner. Maybe a child. Maybe a friend in a culture where cheek kisses are a greeting. The gesture is so familiar, so automatic, so woven into the fabric of human social life that it barely registers as a behavior at all. It's just something people do. But here's a question that almost nobody thinks to ask. When did it start? Not in your life, in the species. When did humans first kiss? And why? The answers are more surprising than almost any other question about human prehistory. Because kissing, it turns out, is not as universal as you probably assume. Not all cultures kiss. Not all cultures have ever kissed. And the history of human kissing takes us from ancient Mesopotamia to the genetic record of our Neanderthal ancestors to the neuroscience of why touching lips with another person does what it does to the human brain. Let's get into it. First, let's establish what we're actually talking about. Because kissing covers a range of behaviors that may have different origins and different functions. There is the romantic or erotic kiss, lip-to-lip contact in the context of sexual or romantic attraction. There is the social kiss, the greeting kiss, the cheek kiss, the kiss of affection between friends and family members that signals closeness without erotic intent. There is the parental kiss, the contact between parents and children, particularly infants, that is found across virtually all human cultures. And there are ritual kisses, the kiss on the hand, the kiss of religious objects, the kiss of fealty or submission that appears across many historical cultures. These may have separate evolutionary and cultural origins. The parental kiss, for example, almost certainly has roots that predate modern humans entirely. Primates press their faces against the faces of their young. And some researchers argue that close oral contact between mothers and infants is an evolutionarily ancient behavior with specific functions related to the transfer of immune information and the stimulation of infant feeding behaviors. This is not the same thing as a romantic kiss, even though both involve mouths coming into contact. So when we ask, when did humans start kissing, we need to be more specific. And the most interesting question, historically and anthropologically, is the romantic or erotic kiss. When did humans first press their lips together in the context of attraction and intimacy? And where? The oldest written evidence of romantic kissing comes from ancient India. Sanskrit texts, including the Vedas, among the oldest written texts in existence, dating to roughly 1500 BCE, contain references to people sniffing each other's mouths, which many scholars interpret as a precursor to or early form of kissing. By around 1000 BCE, Sanskrit texts are describing what seems clearly to be lip kissing in the context of romance and desire. The ancient epic, the Mahabharata, composed sometime between 400 BCE and 400 CE, but drawing on much older oral traditions, contains explicit references to kissing. The Kama Sutra, composed around the 3rd century CE, but codifying practices that were certainly much older, devotes an entire section to the classification and technique of kissing, describing dozens of distinct types of kisses for different contexts and stages of romantic relationship. This doesn't mean kissing was invented in India. It means the oldest written records of romantic kissing happened to come from a literary tradition that was writing things down at a particular time. The absence of evidence in other early written traditions is not evidence of absence of the practice. But it's worth noting that not all ancient written traditions mention kissing. Egyptian hieroglyphic texts and paintings from ancient Egypt, which are extraordinarily detailed about many aspects of intimate life, do not appear to show romantic kissing in the modern sense, though they do show what appears to be proximity and touching of faces. Mesopotamian texts describe many forms of intimacy, but are not clear on lip-to-lip kissing as a common romantic practice. The question of whether kissing is a universal human behavior, something that all humans do regardless of culture, was considered settled for most of the 20th century. The assumption was that yes, of course all humans kiss. It's human nature. That assumption turned out to be wrong. In 2015, researchers William Jankowiak, Shelley Volsche, and Justin Garcia published a study in the American Anthropologist analyzing 168 cultures from the Human Relations Area files, one of the most comprehensive cross-cultural databases in existence, specifically looking for evidence of romantic or sexual kissing. Their findings were striking. Only 46% of the cultures in their sample showed evidence of romantic kissing. More than half did not. The cultures where romantic kissing was absent were not randomly distributed. They were concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa, New Guinea, and Amazonia, regions that had the least historical contact with the cultures of Eurasia, where romantic kissing appears most consistently documented. Cultures with more contact with Eurasian traditions through trade, migration, or colonization were more likely to have adopted kissing. This finding raises a provocative possibility that romantic kissing is not a human universal at all, but a culturally transmitted behavior that originated in a specific region and spread from there. Not something humans do because of their biology alone, but something humans do because they learned it from other humans who did it. This doesn't mean the behavior is purely arbitrary. The fact that it spreads so widely and is so easily adopted and maintained suggests it maps onto genuine underlying neurobiological responses. But it suggests that the specific behavior of lip-to-lip contact in a romantic context, may have cultural origins, not just biological ones. So where did it come from? The honest answer is that we don't know with certainty, but the evidence points in an interesting direction. Researcher Raphael Lodarsky at the University of Oxford has argued that kissing serves multiple distinct functions that explain its persistence and spread where it has been adopted. First, it provides sensory information about a potential mate. The lips and the area around the mouth contain a dense concentration of nerve endings, making them among the most sensitive parts of the human body. Lip contact allows for the detection of subtle cues about a partner's health, genetic compatibility, and hormonal status. Testosterone, for example, is present in saliva and can be transferred through kissing. Research has shown that men who kissed their partners more frequently had significantly lower cortisol levels, lower stress, than those who didn't. And work by Klaus Wedekind at the University of Bern on MHC, major histocompatibility complex, genes suggest that humans are attracted to partners with different immune gene profiles, possibly detectable through scent and close contact. Kissing may provide close enough proximity to assess this compatibility in ways that are difficult at normal social distances. Second, kissing maintains and deepens pair bonds. The physical act of kissing releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, in both partners simultaneously. It requires a level of trust and vulnerability that creates reciprocal investment. The neuroscience is consistent. Kissing does something to the human brain that is distinctly different from other forms of social touch. But here's where the story gets genuinely surprising. Evidence suggests that something like kissing may predate modern humans entirely. Researchers studying ancient human DNA, specifically the work of Svante Pääbo at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, who received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2022 for his work sequencing ancient human genomes, have established beyond reasonable doubt that modern humans and Neanderthals interbred. Repeatedly, across multiple geographic regions and multiple time periods. And interbreeding in this context means exactly what it implies: physical intimacy. Contact close enough to produce children. The specific behaviors involved in that contact are lost to time. We cannot observe them directly, but a 2024 study published in the journal Science by researchers at the University of Copenhagen found direct evidence, through analysis of ancient dental plaque, of gene transfer consistent with oral contact between modern humans and Neanderthals. The researchers discovered genetic sequences from modern humans in Neanderthal dental plaque, the hardened calculus that preserves biological material for tens of thousands of years, at a site in Europe. The most parsimonious explanation for how modern human genetic material ended up in Neanderthal dental plaque is oral contact. Not necessarily kissing in the romantic sense we would recognize, but close facial contact between two species that were already, we know, intimate enough to produce children. What this suggests is extraordinary. The intimate oral contact between modern humans and Neanderthals, whatever form it took, may have contributed to the spread of oral microbiome communities between the two species. We don't just carry Neanderthal DNA in our genomes. We may carry the legacy of ancient human-Neanderthal oral contact in the microbial communities of our mouths. The science here is preliminary, and the interpretation is careful. The researchers do not claim this is definitive evidence of prehistoric kissing, but it opens a window onto the intimacy of ancient human encounters that goes beyond anything previously documented. And it raises a question worth sitting with. If modern humans and Neanderthals were intimate enough to have children, and if oral contact between the species can be detected in ancient dental plaque, what does this mean for the history of human kissing? Was some form of intimate oral contact present not just in modern humans, but in the broader Homo genus? Did something recognizable as kissing predate our species? We don't know, and we probably never will know with certainty. But the question itself is remarkable. Let me close with something that I think puts all of this in perspective. The neuroscience of kissing is consistent across the cultures that practice it. The release of oxytocin, the activation of reward pathways, the specific pattern of neural engagement that distinguishes a kiss from other forms of touch, these are not cultural inventions. They are biological responses to a specific stimulus. The body knows what kissing is. This means that wherever and whenever the behavior first appeared, whether in ancient India or in the encounter zones between modern humans and Neanderthals, or in the convergent discovery of multiple isolated cultures that arrived at the same behavior independently, it was immediately reinforced by neurobiological reward. It felt good. It created bonding. It produced trust and reduced stress and generated information about a partner that was genuinely useful. The biology was already there, waiting. What kissing required was not biological invention, but behavioral discovery. Someone, somewhere, pressed their lips against another person's lips and discovered that this did something. And then they did it again. And then they shared the behavior in a way that it spread, through cultural transmission, through observation, through the simple fact that it worked. The oldest kiss we can document is from ancient Indian texts over 3,000 years ago. The intimacy that may have preceded kissing, the oral contact between species, the parental proximity of mouth to face, stretches back much further. And the biological capacity to respond to kissing in the way that we do, the neural architecture that makes kissing do what it does, is as old as the social brain itself. You kiss because your ancestors discovered that it worked, because it releases the right chemicals, because it transmits information and creates trust and signals vulnerability and deepens bonds, because it does in a few seconds of contact what hours of conversation sometimes can't. And somewhere in the deep past, someone discovered this for the first time. We don't know their name. We don't know their language. We don't know if they would recognize the word kiss or the gesture in the form we use it. But they discovered something real, and you are the result of everyone who kept doing it. If this one made you think about the last time you kissed someone, you know what to do. I'll see you in the next one. There's something worth dwelling on before we move on. The distribution of kissing cultures. When Jankowiak and colleagues mapped where romantic kissing was and wasn't found, one of the most striking patterns was this. Hunter-gatherer societies were significantly less likely to practice romantic kissing than agricultural or industrialized societies. Of the hunter-gatherer cultures in their sample with sufficient documentation, romantic kissing appeared in fewer than half. Of the non-hunter-gatherer cultures, the rate was considerably higher. This is a curious finding. It's consistent with the hypothesis that romantic kissing, in the specific lip-to-lip form, developed or was elaborated in the context of settled societies, perhaps because settled life created new social contexts for extended intimacy, or because written and artistic traditions in settled civilizations documented and transmitted the behavior in ways that accelerated its spread. But it's not consistent with the idea that kissing is purely a modern or historical innovation. Hunter-gatherer societies where kissing does appear include some of the most isolated and ancient cultures on Earth, suggesting that when it occurs in these contexts, it represents independent development or very ancient transmission, not recent borrowing from agricultural civilizations. The picture that emerges is one of a behavior that has roots in ancient primate and human biology, that was independently discovered or elaborated in different cultural contexts, and that spread dramatically through cultural transmission wherever it appeared. Because once you encounter it, the neurobiological reward system does the rest of the work. There's also the matter of what kissing does for infants, and this dimension of the story is almost certainly the most ancient. Across virtually every culture ever documented, parents kiss their infants. This is not a learned cultural behavior in the same sense as romantic kissing. It appears spontaneously, universally, and without instruction. Mothers press their lips to their babies' heads, cheeks, hands, feet. The behavior is so automatic that most people who do it cannot explain why they do it, because it doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like a compulsion. Some researchers, including evolutionary biologist Robin Dunbar at the University of Oxford, have argued that parental kissing has distinct functions. It transmits the mother's oral microbiome to the infant. Early colonization of the gut and oral microbiome by maternal bacteria has significant effects on immune development. It allows the mother to assess the infant's temperature and health through close contact. And it stimulates the release of oxytocin in both mother and infant, deepening the attachment bond that is essential for infant survival. These functions suggest that parental oral contact, the precursor to what we would recognize as kissing, may have been part of human parental behavior for far longer than we have any written record. Perhaps for hundreds of thousands of years. Perhaps since before our species. If this is true, then the body already knew what kissing was, in a functional sense, long before anyone kissed in the romantic sense we recognize today. The neural architecture was already there. The neurochemical response was already there. The behavior was already there in a different context. What romantic kissing required was the discovery by individuals in specific cultural contexts that the behavior could be transplanted from the parent-infant context into the adult romantic context, and that it worked there too, perhaps even more powerfully. One final thing. The word. The English word kiss has Old English roots, sisson in Old English, kussen in German, related words across the Germanic language family. These languages, all having words for the same behavior, suggest that whatever they called it, Germanic-speaking peoples were kissing before the written record begins. But in many of the cultures where romantic kissing was absent before contact with Eurasian traditions, there was no word for it either. When European colonizers arrived in various parts of the world and encountered cultures that didn't kiss romantically, the kissing they brought with them was sometimes described by indigenous people using borrowed words or newly coined terms, because there was no existing word for the behavior. The history of the word for kissing in a given language is, in a way, a record of the history of the behavior in that culture. Where the word is ancient and native, the behavior is too. Where the word is borrowed or recent, so is the practice. And languages that have not just one word but many, like Sanskrit, which classified dozens of types of kisses long before most of the world was writing anything down, suggest cultures where the behavior was not just present but elaborated, celebrated, theorized. Where someone thought carefully enough about kissing to name all the different kinds. That kind of careful attention to a behavior is not what you give to something new or uncertain. It's what you give to something central, something important, something worth getting right. Before we close, let me take you somewhere unexpected. The intersection of kissing and disease. If kissing transfers saliva, and saliva contains bacteria and viruses, then kissing is also a vector for pathogen transmission. This is not a modern discovery. Traditional cultures that discouraged or never developed romantic kissing sometimes explicitly noted concerns about the exchange of fluids. And modern medicine has confirmed that certain pathogens, Epstein-Barr virus, the cause of infectious mononucleosis, most famously, are transmitted primarily through kissing, which is why mononucleosis is called the kissing disease. But here's what's interesting from an evolutionary perspective. If kissing transmits pathogens, why did it persist and spread in cultures that adopted it? Why didn't natural selection work against it? The answer is probably the same answer that explains many risky but rewarding human behaviors. The benefits outweighed the costs. The bonding, the mate assessment, the oxytocin release, the intimacy, these provided enough reproductive and social advantage to more than compensate for the disease transmission risk. And once kissing became established as a cultural norm, the social cost of not kissing, the failure to bond, the signaling of distrust or aversion, may have itself become a reproductive disadvantage. But there's another layer. The exchange of microbiomes that happens during kissing is not purely negative. Exposure to a partner's oral bacteria may actually strengthen immune responses over time. Shared microbiome communities between long-term partners, and they do develop shared communities, with couples converging in their oral microbiomes over years of kissing, may provide mutual immune benefits that offset disease transmission risks. In other words, kissing may be one of those behaviors where the immediate surface reading, you're exchanging germs, misses the deeper biological logic. It's not just an exchange of pathogens, it's an exchange of biological information, of immune system exposure, of microbiome diversity. It's a form of biological communication that operates beneath the level of conscious awareness, and that has effects that extend far beyond the moment of contact. The ancients who first kissed didn't know any of this. They just knew it felt right. They just knew it worked, and they were correct, for reasons they couldn't have articulated but that we are only beginning to understand.